everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to do a updated annotation guide for my books. I've shown briefly in other videos a look at some of my annotated books, so I thought now would be a good time to do a full guide to my process. I feel like if you clicked on this video, you probably know what annotation is, but annotating books beyond like marking things for school has really blown up in a lot of book spaces online in recent years. There's many different levels to it, from just marking with tabs and using pencil to underline, to doing very decorative annotations with a lot of different colors and doodles. I'm going to start off by talking about when I choose to annotate, which is something that's very specific for me. I usually only annotate more heavily in books that I am rereading, or if they are in series that I really like and know I'm going to continue and I'm going to want to come back to the previous books again. If I'm reading something for the first time, I usually don't do anything permanent in my books. I might use just a single color tab to mark out some lines I like, or any really standout moments, so then I have them already marked out when I finish the book and decide I want to keep it. But if I end up not liking the book, I can easily take out those tabs and the book isn't altered anyway, so the next person reading it, they won't have to look at any of the things I've written. I will do highlighting or bookmarking a lot more frequent in ebooks and audiobooks, since obviously it's not permanent, it's just a digital file. And usually I am reading an ebook because it's an e-arc that I have. And obviously with reading arcs, I want to mark a lot in them because I need to remember what's going on for when I write my review afterwards. Now let's move into talking about some of my materials for annotating. The first thing that I had started out using was these post-it flags. These are a type of tab that's really readily available at places like Target. So if you're just starting out with annotating and you want to go into a store right now and find something, this is a pretty good option. Then we have, of course, a lot of different types of fun tabs. These you can get at a bunch of different places. I think these are from 3 different sources, but the most obvious and easy option to find them is on Amazon. But I'm pretty sure all of these are resold things from AliExpress. So if you want to go to the source, you can probably get them even cheaper than Amazon if you go there. I have a lot more than I necessarily need. I had gotten one pack and then used through a lot of them, and then bought this pack that doesn't have the ruler on the side. And then I ended up getting another pack of this style as a Christmas gift. So now I am kind of overflowing with tabs, but it just means I guess I'll have to find some more books to annotate in the future. Another thing I've started doing is having a full-on post-it note. These are really helpful if you want to have a long comment in your book, or if you want to try and do what's called the, I think, blurting method for studying, which is basically where you're trying to remember everything that's happened in the last couple chapters by writing out all of the big moments. And it's basically creating a recap for yourself to come back to. I also have quite a few different colors of zebra mild liners. I use these both for writing comments as well as for underlining. And lastly, of course, you need a pen that doesn't bleed. So definitely not the Pilot G2. This is usually my go-to pen when it comes to journaling, but I found it's not very good for annotating. I really don't recommend one that has a very thick ballpoint, because if you're using something like a Pilot G2 with a ruler, when you're making the underlining, a lot of the ink can get deposited along the side of the ruler, which then will get smudged across your page if you move the ruler down. So a smaller, more fine-tip pen like a micron is good, or something more temporary like a friction pen is another good alternative. A question you might be having with annotating is how cumbersome is it? And how are you able to annotate on the go? The first option is obviously using something like a book sleeve for storage. I have this one, which I think is actually supposed to be an iPad cover, but I can fit a smaller paperback as well as my tabs and pen in here, so I can kind of keep them all in one place. Another thing that I will do is when I pick out my tab colors, I will pull off the whole stack and then stick it onto the bookmark that I'm using when I'm reading. That way I have all of my tab colors together. I have the full stack of them, so I don't have to worry about them running out, and it's really handy for annotating as I'm reading. Next, I wanted to talk about creating my tab key. I usually will get a post-it note and then include an example tab of each color that I'm going to be using. And then I will stick this in the front of the book. And then to make it more permanent, I will usually put washi tape around the post-it note to kind of more permanently stick it down. If I have a lot of tabs I want to use, I will usually add a second post-it note, or cut a post-it note in half so I have 1.5 post-it notes worth of space. And sometimes I'll add an example tab that I haven't assigned to anything, because I might not know what that book will hold that I might want to mark as I read. And I usually will find a use for that last tab that I haven't assigned. Now let's move on to what I choose to tab in my books. It usually changes per book, but usually, the first thing will be iconic scenes. These are ones that made me feel anything. Basically, these are the parts of the books that made me go, oh my god, this book is so good, both positive and negative emotion-wise. These are mostly so if I want to go back and reread my favorite parts of the book, I have a tab for that. The next tab is usually for character descriptions. I really like imagining what the characters look like or are wearing. So it's nice to have all of the canonical information for what the characters are supposed to look like in the book. Another tab I have is for major plot moments. This is usually marking out where big reveals or dramatic moments in the story are. Or if there's a lot of exposition where a character is like, the villain is going to go do X because of Y, I will usually put a tab in for that as kind of like marking out the path I think the book is taking. I also have a tab for world building. Since I mostly read fantasy, this is for things like how magic systems work, world building stuff that seems relevant to the plot, and just the kind of things that make me go, oh, okay, so that I can remember I had those epiphanies with the world building later on. I used to put plot moments and world building under the same color tab, but I found there's usually a clear difference between stuff that is really relevant to the plot versus things that are more like flavor text to kind of round out the world, and I like having those two things be separate. Another tab I usually use is for really good quotes. This is pretty self-explanatory, but these are really good to have on hand if you need to make an Instagram post about the book and you want to include one of the quotes as a caption. And the last thing I often will tab is repeated themes. Not all books will have like big themes or messages in them, but I feel like there will be like an aha moment where I'm like, okay, this is definitely going to be relevant later on, and I'll want to mark it down. When it comes to assigning colors to all of these things, I usually will create a new color scheme that matches the book cover or book series. Like for one series I've been reading, I usually tab all of like the romantic scenes as pink, all of the physical descriptions as purple, and then everything plot related as green. And like I said before, I usually will include a full key of all of the tabs I'm going to be using in the front of my book. This is mostly how I tab when it comes to fiction books, but I also use tabs for nonfiction as well. I do read nonfiction for fun over like for school, so I think maybe my tabs here are a little bit more relaxed than how I did it when I was in school. I usually will only have like 2 or 3 tabs. The first one will be for everything related to the main relevant topic of the book, and then we'll tab how the subtopic of a chapter relates to the big picture of what the book is about. And then I will also have a tab for more so fun facts, and these are like smaller moments that I really like, or that made me think, oh, I could definitely see myself bringing this up in a video in the future, or maybe I wanted to write an article about it on a similar topic. Just kind of like tangential things that are also interesting to me. And lastly, I will sometimes use a tab specifically for the sources that the nonfiction book is referencing, just kind of like to prompt my mind that I should go back and kind of look at these other sources to find further reading on the topics. This is definitely a really good tab to have if you're reading anything for school. I definitely think looking at the sources of the thing you're reading is a good way to get more sources for yourself. Now that we've talked about my tabbing system, let's talk about what I will actually write in my books. So for me, underlining is probably the most common form of marking that I do in my books. I usually only underline very brief things to comment on, or quotes that I really like and feel can stand strong outside of the meaning of the story. I also will not often add a tab every time I underline or have a comment. I personally don't really like to overstuff my book with tabs, and I just want to reserve them for more bigger moments. When I do take notes or have something else to say, I usually will write it out on a sticky note and insert that in my book, over instead writing it in the margins. I personally don't really like the way it looks when there's a lot of writing on the side. If I do write my books, it's usually a very brief reaction to things, but I found that I don't really like doing it very much, so I've kind of phased it out in favor of just writing in post-it notes. Okay, now I thought I'd move into showing you some of the books that I have annotated, so you can kind of see examples of all of the things I've done. I'm going to show you the very first book I actually annotated, and that was A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. When I pulled this out on my shelves, I was like, holy crap, look at how long these tabs are. Nowadays, I try to make my tabs be very, very minimally visible, but these ones are really just like flying out in the wind. And this is the series that I said I was using the 3 color system of the pink, purple, and green tabs. Probably the series I went like most hard with my tabbing and annotating in was my copies of the Grandmaster Demonic Cultivation. If I open it up, I can show you my annotation key, which as you can see, I did the like 1.5 post-it note in, and has the washi tape border around it to stick it down. This one is also one of the books that I did more like annotation in. I have a little bit of underlining as well as some small like notes on the sides. I tried to keep my color scheme pretty consistent across all of the volumes, but obviously some things kind of like phase in and out of the course of the story. So my annotation key is not the same for each one of them. Here's my annotation key for this one. And similarly, and in this one, I was still writing very small comments on the side and underlining. Here's an example of a book that I just did like a single tab color in. You can pretty much not see it at all because I used a very, very light purple. But this one was a book that I was reading for the first time, so I just decided I would add tabs in for certain like scenes that I liked, or moments that had really good writing, or themes that I really resonated with. So this one obviously has no writing in it, it just has a couple tabs in the side. And then I think I'll show you my most annotated book, which is Silver Under Nightfall by Win Chapeko. This is one of the ones that I just like wrote directly on the front cover for. I think I want to eventually do a more decorated cover page, which is something that I have seen other people do. I think it's a good thing to add in specifically for your favorite book that you're rereading. There are a lot of tabs in this one, but actually no writing in it. I definitely think for like the third time I read this through, I'm going to do a lot more underlining and like annotating with additional like post-it notes stuck in with my thoughts. And to show you a book that I think definitely warrants a lot of tabs in it, we have House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. This is one of the books that I ended up putting post notes in because I had a lot of thoughts, especially since this book is one that really warrants a lot of discussion. So it's nice to have that extra space to put down all of my ideas. Anyway, that is a full look at my annotation process. I hope that through looking through some of my books, it gave you some inspiration if you're interested in starting to annotate for yourself. But that is going to be it for me today. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing if you aren't already. Consider following me on the Storygraph if you are interested in seeing my reading updates in real time. And also consider following me on my Bookstagram, which is also linked in the description. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!